Is Super Meat Boy worth playing in 2024? Yes. Assuming you even have a passing interest in platformers, and you rarely throw your controller through a TV or monitor in frustration, you really should play Super Meat Boy if you haven't already. One quick note is if you end up enjoying the video and feel like hitting the like button, it would be greatly appreciated. It really helps the channel and helps the videos reach more people. So with that mandatory comment out of the way, Super Meat Boy originally released in 2010 and was kind of a big success story for the still developing indie scene at the time, and it was actually a major release for the Xbox Live Arcade, which was also still developing at the time. It's a game that's essentially been on my backlog for well over a decade. I did play a bit of it in, I believe, 2015, and I always meant to go back and finish it. So for whatever reason, I was looking for something a little different to play, and I ended up booting the copy up I had on Steam, and I played all the way through it. Or at least the light world. I feel like it says quite a bit that 9 years after originally playing it, some of the muscle memory was still there. I believe I only played the first 3 areas, but yet some of it stuck with me, although that's probably partially because of the repeated attempts to get through some levels. It feels a bit ridiculous to ask, but what is Super Meat Boy for anyone not familiar? Super Meat Boy is an extremely fast-paced platformer that's well known for its difficulty. The levels are divided into worlds like many other platformers, around 20 in most, except towards the end of the game. As far as the difficulty goes, the difficulty is what I expect will be an issue for some. Here, that difficulty is really about speed, accuracy, and repetition to build muscle memory. The game starts on the easy side, giving you plenty of time to kind of get to grips with the controls. Towards the middle of the game is I think where the game probably flows the best, and it definitely starts to ramp up the difficulty. But it's overall still pretty reasonable. You may be stuck on a mission for a few minutes, but likely not very long. The later half, on the other hand, yeah, it's going to test you. To add a little more context to that difficulty, Steam shows I have 7 hours in the game. About an hour and a half of that were likely spent in the first 3 areas. The remaining 5.5 hours were the last 3 areas of the game. In fact, the very last area likely accounted for 2.5 hours or more by itself. Basically what I'm saying is, it gets far more challenging towards the end. One thing I do want to note is that there's more to do beyond the main story that I've done here. There is the Cotton Alley, which is an area that's kind of meant for people kind of looking for even more of a challenge. There's also a Dark World version of missions, which after I barely scraped by in the normal Light World, I'm not doing right now. There's no shortage of content or challenges here, so you can get way more than 7 hours out of the game. The levels in Super Meat Boy are typically short and can mostly be cleared in 30 seconds. Particularly in the early and mid game. While early levels are straightforward, later levels are partially a puzzle to be solved. Trying to figure out what path you can take to get to your destination, it may take many attempts to figure out the path. In many cases though, there is more than one approach, and for me it sometimes felt good when I realized I'm not sure that's how that was supposed to be done, but yet I still found a way to get through. Failure and recovery from that failure in Super Meat Boy is insanely fast, in fact near instant. The moment you see your character disintegrate into a meaty mist, you are about to respawn. This helps massively with the difficulty, both allowing you to get more repetition in more quickly, and also making the game feel far less punishing than if you had to wait for 5 seconds for a loading screen. I honestly believe those fast load times are one of the major reasons for the game's success. Additionally, when you fail, the music continues to play. I realize that sounds like an odd detail to mention, but there's a couple reasons I bring it up. First, the music is fantastic, particularly the mid and later levels, and you don't want to hear that track starting over every 10 to 20 seconds when you splatter. Additionally, in many games, when you hear the music restart after a death, I know at least for me, and I suspect many others, it feels almost like a punishment. You keep hearing the same part of the same song over and over again, and it can be extremely grating, almost like another level of punishment. That isn't the case here, and I think it very much contributes to why the quick failures don't feel as frustrating as they probably should. The music doesn't stop, the music just keeps rolling, you keep hearing the track, and it's probably a track you're enjoying. And if it stopped, that would really kill the flow, and again, hearing the first few notes would probably just feel like another level of punishment, like it does in many games. It really doesn't here. Like I said, I know it's an odd detail to fixate on, but I'm convinced there's a secret here. So I've tried to show a variety of gameplay. And if you've not played the game, you are likely getting a feel for what to expect. But maybe you are still wondering, how bad does it get? With that in mind, I'm going to show my successful clear of the second to last level for a few reasons that I'll talk about after. What I will say is that there isn't much of a puzzle to solve in this level, in my opinion, which is one of the reasons I chose it. So it shouldn't spoil anything for anyone, at least in my opinion. But keep in mind, it is the second to last level. So this is the level I spent the most time on. The early jumps definitely caused some deaths, but it's really as you start to move right that things really start to ramp up, and you're having to time some of these jumps very tightly. I have a feeling it looks quite a bit easier than it actually is, but in the main game at least, this is the answer to how bad does it get. This level is definitely a difficulty spike. What you see happening is a result of many, many, many deaths, and you naturally get into this rhythm. And that rhythm feels amazing, particularly the moment you clear the level. There's something incredibly satisfying about making a jump perfectly 5 times after failing hard the 10 prior attempts. And that level of satisfaction is really present throughout the entire game, but it really is what pulls you forward in the later levels as the challenge creeps up. So again, to recap, for anyone even remotely interested in platformers that has not played this, I highly, highly recommend playing this. It is a hard game, but it's a very satisfying game. The music is great, the flow state you get into, even with the deaths, is amazing, and the fun factor is incredibly high. That said, it's absolutely a difficult game. It will test your patience. I will say that I would consider myself just to be barely average from a skill standpoint, so I do think this is doable for most people. It will just require a lot of repetition. That said, this game will be too difficult for some. It will also be too frustrating for some, because that margin between success and failure can be razor thin. If the repetition sounds like it will be a problem, it probably will be. While the game does do a lot to make that repetition feel a whole lot better and a whole lot less punishing, there is no doubt that that repetition is going to be infuriating for some. However, my overall recommendation for most people is to play this game if you haven't. Keep it on your backlog or add it to your backlog. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave it. The next Operation Backlog game is Super Metroid. I finished the game last night and I'll be working on a video shortly. Additionally, you will likely see another video before that where I'm going to do something a little different with the game selection. I'm basically going to get some input on the game that comes after Super Metroid. Not sure if this will work out, and if it doesn't, I'll just choose the next game. But it's something that I wanted to eventually get to, so I wanted to go ahead and try it once, and see if I can get enough feedback to choose the next game. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.